Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley. I'm the manager of alumni programs here at Girls Who Code. I have the honor of introducing Emily Moss for tonight's Girls Who Code talk session on preparing for technical interviews. Emily Moss is a director of alumni programs here at Girls Who Code, where she has worked for 3 years on student recruitment and new program development. Emily has worked in tech education for 9 years at startups, big companies, and nonprofits. She believes the world will literally be a better place with more diverse voices when more diverse voices are involved in designing, building, and leading the tech world, and loves seeing the incredible things Girls Who Code alumni have accomplished. Some fun facts about Emily. Emily is a gentle dictator of her long-running book club. She teaches yoga on the side and is now on Zoom, so hit her up if you're interested. And she's the only Girls Who Code team member living in Chicago. I'm going to kick it over to Emily.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. We are so excited that you're here. This is our newest iteration in the Girls Who Code Talk series. I'm very excited tonight. We're going to be talking about prepping for technical interviews. How do you get ready for them? How do you make the most of that experience? And we have a couple of really amazing panelists joining us today. I want to start with Margaret Poteet, who's the Director of Advisory Services at KPMG, one of our Girls Who Code partners. In her role, Margaret utilizes technical and industry knowledge to identify complex client issues and build long-term business relationships with key executives through engagement, delivery, and networking in professional organizations. That is a lot, and Margaret is going to tell you more about it. When she is not working, Margaret loves going to the gym, hiking in the spring, summer, and fall, and skiing in the winter. Thank you so much, Margaret. We're really glad that you're here with us. Our second panelist this evening is Maggie Falter. Maggie is a technical sourcer for HBO Max and CNN Digital, we all know what they are, at Warner Media, another partner of Girls Who Code. And in her role, Maggie focuses on building tech teams for HBO Max and CNN Digital. When she's not working, she loves exploring museums, parks, neighborhoods, and is especially drawn to different cultures, foods, and experiences. To Margaret and Maggie, thank you so much for being here with us today. Yeah, there they are. We're going to start off the evening with an icebreaker just to get the ball rolling and remind us that we're all in this together. So I want to start off with a question that addresses a concern Girls Who Code college age alumni have mentioned many times with us. And we're going to start with this icebreaker and then move into some questions y'all have submitted in advance. We have great discussion questions and Q&A. All right, here's our icebreaker. Share a time that you had an interview that did not go so well. This is a big one. What did you learn from the experience and how you applied that knowledge in other future interviews in your professional career? So let's start with Margaret.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here today. And that one there, it actually shaped how I approached interviews in the future, as well as how I approach difficult situations. I was on an interview one time and everything was going great. At the end, the interviewer asked me, "Why are you leaving now? Why are you even considering leaving your job?" And my response was around the quality of the people. And I was talking about my current employer in a very poor fashion. And from that, I knew based on his eye contact that that wasn't a good thing. So the interview was going well. And I said to myself, you really blew it this time. So what I learned from that afterwards, and every interview that I ever went on, I looked at the situation, and every difficult situation I was in, I looked at it from the standpoint of, yeah, I may be talking about the quality of the people. However, taking that negative and turning it into a positive and using it as an opportunity to develop other people around me. Yes, they may not have the same skills, but at the same time, people are diverse. People bring different things to the table. So as everyone here every day, inclusion and diversity. And when you look at inclusion and diversity, You're looking at different skills, different ways of approaching things. So taking that particular lesson, I said to myself, okay, that's an opportunity to leverage different skills and different approaches in order to make the team stronger, in order to get to that objective in the end, but taking a different path. Instead of looking at it as people are not of the quality that at that time early in my career, I thought they should be. And then the other aspect is embracing that diversity, looking at the capabilities that people do bring.
Thanks, Margaret. I think watching how we talk about our coworkers is a good lesson for everybody in most circumstances.
Yes.
Before I turn over to Maggie, I want to let you all know that we are going to have poll questions, interactive questions during our event tonight. So when that pops up on your screen, you got to answer quickly. We'll capture your responses in about 30 seconds, and then we'll think together about what it means when we get those responses back. So while we wait for that first poll, I'm going to turn it over to Maggie. Oh, it's a poll. It should have popped up on your screen. Go ahead and answer, and we'll come back to your responses in just a few moments. Maggie, while folks fill out the poll, can you tell us about a time when your interview didn't go well?
Yes, and first I just want to say thank you so much for having me. If you do hear some background noise, I live in New York City and I don't have control of my heat and it is blasting in the back. So hopefully that'll go off soon. But first off, one time I remember I showed up in a suit, and the coordinator who scheduled my interview had told me we're very casual here at AppNexus, which is where I had the interview, so you can feel free to wear whatever you like. But I was traveling and all I had was a full-on suit, and I felt like that would be really intense. I walked into the office and I looked around and everyone was wearing jeans and hoodies and I felt very out of place. But luckily I did wear some Nike Air Force One shoes with my suit, and really nervous and felt very out of place. During a water break, I kind of went to the bathroom and someone complimented me on my outfit, and it made me realize everyone can dress whatever way they would like, and so that kind of set my nerves. But that was a funny scenario. And then another time, I think the interviews I just knew I did not do well in and kind of felt embarrassed, right? Were the times that I didn't answer authentically and honestly. So of course we have all of these prep questions that we can think of scenarios for ahead of time, but there were definitely some times right after college or during college where I didn't have professional experience to speak to. I only had, restaurant experiences that actually could answer the question pretty well. And instead of going in and explaining a true experience that I had personally, maybe working in the restaurant to answer the question, I fibbed and just used an example from one of my coworkers in one of the internships I had. And it came across definitely inauthentic. The interviewer probably could tell I was lying or fabricating in some way. And so with that, I kind of reflected on that experience and realized that it's okay to tell your authentic story, and actually that comes across better for the interviewer, even if you need a moment to think, and if you don't have a specific scenario that you think is the best, in reality, if you just speak to your true honest experiences, don't fake it till you make it. Thank you, Ashley. Because they probably will recognize that you're faking it. So be yourself is what I kind of learned from that experience.
Those are both great pieces of advice. The results are in from our poll. So about 62% of our participants feel not really prepared. So what I want to emphasize here is for folks on the line, you're not alone. You are in the same bucket as so many people. And about another 38% felt somewhat prepared. So nobody feels perfectly, brilliantly prepared walking into these interviews. So just know that and feel some solidarity with your fellow students here. I'll keep mine brief, but one thought I had is I've actually interviewed a lot of people, as I know Margaret and Maggie have as well. And I was interviewing a young woman for an internship. This is way back in the day, and I live in Chicago. And I asked her, why do you want to work at our organization? And she said, well, my friend said it's really cool to be in Chicago in the summer. And I thought, well, what? That doesn't answer my question. That tells me why you want to live in Chicago. That doesn't tell me why you want to work at our organization. And I think that points to another area that people struggle with, which is really thinking about what is exciting to you about this opportunity in this company, because bringing that enthusiasm can be a great starting place for any conversation. I want to jump into some of the discussion questions here. We have students from a lot of different levels on the phone. And so we've sort of structured these questions to reach different audiences at different times. So the first one is around rising college students, folks sort of at the more early start of their college journey. And we've received a lot of questions about the interview process as a whole, and especially around what makes interviews unique and different. This is like really uncharted territory for a lot of folks. So one sort of big picture question here is, what is the difference between a regular interview and a technical interview? And when should candidates expect to be at these different stages in the interview process? Maggie, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, in my experience, both at Xander and then now Warner Media, we definitely start off with more of a behavioral interview. So most likely at big and small tech companies, you may chat with a recruiter such as myself first. So they're in HR, so they're really just kind of trying to gauge if it would make sense to move you forward. And those will mostly be behavioral and just kind of touch on a little bit of your experience. So really just chatting through your resume most of the time. And then from there, you might chat with someone more technical. And that would be maybe a couple more behavioral questions in the beginning, but then potentially a coding test or some type of technical assessment. Just to make sure that it would make sense to move forward, that you kind of have that baseline tech knowledge. And then usually from there would be more of that whiteboarding and live in-person technical and behavioral assessments with members of the team that you would join. So usually it kind of gradually goes from behavioral to tech, and then a mix of the two, and kind of see how you communicate while being technical and things like that. I think that answers the first bit, but happy to elaborate after Margaret if you have some things to add.
That's a great start. So just to summarize, you usually start with that behavioral interview, like, are you a good fit for this company? And if you get past that, moving into whatever versions of technical interviews that company might have.
Exactly.
That's great to know. Margaret, has that been your experience too? Or is there anything you can add?
Yes, that is the same experience. And in the beginning, when the resumes come in, of course, we're looking for certain skill sets to really pop on that resume. So when you're talking about exploring the entry-level people coming out of college, we're looking at what courses have you taken, what are you doing on your internships, and so forth. So after that, we do a screening. With that screening, it's around, okay, what are your actual technology tools? And what did you learn on your actual engagements, as far as your, not necessarily engagements, but your internships, and what was your role? Role is very key. When we actually bring you in, the first interview, we're not going to have you sit there and start doing coding on the board. That's normally not it. We're trying to, like Maggie mentioned, it's more around the behavioral aspects. At the same time, when we actually take you to that next interview and we're looking at your technical skills, we may present a case study to you. What is very key to note, it's not about having the best technical solution. What it's about is, what is your approach and what is your critical thinking skills? So that's one of the key aspects that college students need to realize. No one is expecting you to have all the answers all the time, because throughout your entire career, you will never have all the answers all the time. So it's more about being able to critically think through the problem. What is your approach? And quite frankly, you may get to a point that you don't know the answer. So how do you get that answer? So that's more or less what we're looking for within those interviews.
Thank you. That's so informative. I think it's really reassuring to hear that even folks that have been around the block and have interviewed for many jobs and interviewed many people, you don't always know the answers in the interview. In fact, you may not know the answer ever, and you may still get that job if you do a good job communicating your process and asking good questions.
Exactly.
Thanks to you both for those answers. One thing we hear a lot about is like applying for your dream job or your dream internship, and it's nerve wracking, and you get that call for your interview, and you're like so excited, you're jumping for joy, you're telling your friends, you're calling your family, and then it is just so scary, and you have to prep for it. And so we're gonna put a poll question up for the audience first, which is around what resources do you use to prepare for interviews? And if you have specific resources you use here, websites, tools, books, please post them in the chat, like share with each other things that you have found really helpful. And then the question I want to ask Margaret and Maggie here is around the resources that you might recommend. And so some that we've heard are Leak Code and Cracking the Code, which are resources online available for students. But I think the broader question here is, what are your tips for preparation? Any tools or strategies you might use getting ready for that dream job interview? And Margaret, why don't we start with you on this one?
Sure. Number one, when you go to the internet, there are so many sources out there. It's almost to the point it's information overload. Some of the ones that I have seen, and pretty much I actually asked a couple of our employees, what did you use? What was relevant? What was useful? And they came back with freecodecamp.org. It provides over 6,000 tutorials. It has videos, articles, interactive coding lessons that you can take. It actually has study groups out there. So the key point, it's free. So that's very key. HackerRank, that's another dashboard that you can take advantage of. And they have various resources out there and interview prep kits, tutorials, and so on. So the good news is there's a ton of free information. So you really don't have an excuse in the end for not using them to sharpen your skills. And keep in mind, even after you get that great job, you can still use these to continue to sharpen your skills. So I always say the internet is your friend. Google it, find the information out there, and take advantage of it.
I love that. Can I just repeat, you said freecodecamp.org, and was there a second name of a website you mentioned?
Yeah, HackerRank.
HackerRank.
www.hackerrank.com. I can put it in the chat window here.
Sure. I also loved the point about study groups, which is, really important. Like, you don't necessarily have to do this by yourself. You could gather a group of friends, for example, your Girls Who Code College Loop, or you could get a group together online and on Zoom, hold yourselves accountable here, working together to prepare. Before we move over to Maggie, just so you all know, it looks like interview blogs, like blog posts about interviewing was the most popular resource people use. 37% of you use that. And then next up was interactive websites, 26%. So lots of different options there. Free is great. Love that, Margaret. It's out there. Maggie, what can you add here?
Yeah, so definitely going off actually, you know what? I'm going to back up a bit. I think the one main thing that you can do for both behavioral and technical interview prep is first kind of like going in within yourself and really doing like a little bit of a check in terms of why you really want that role, what your career goals are, and just kind of tap into your own self-awareness really quick. I know that's really cliche, but I think that is really important, and it'll end up going a long way. Now, in terms of actual, all the things you really need to know, I also think that company blogs. So for example, Xander, which is the advertising technology group under Warner Media, they have a really robust blog where you can see about articles that have been written from anyone from interns to senior executives, and they explain lots of things like what their specific team is doing, what kind of data they're doing, what kind of processes and languages and systems they use. So if you do a deep dive of like the tech stack of the company that you're interested in, I think that that can also be really helpful. And then, yeah, also like reviewing old homeworks, if you have any specific problems or problem sets that you had worked on in school, or even that your friends or family members, you know, that took really great courses, you can access those. And then finally, just kind of focusing on the three areas that I think a lot of tech companies interview on are, which are data structures, algorithms, and system design. So kind of working through how you would think through a system design problem. One of the main, aspects of technical interviewing that we look at, as Margaret had kind of alluded to earlier, is kind of just like how you think and how you work through a problem. So just working through that. And if you hit a crossroads, just not feeling uncomfortable to ask the interviewer a question, or whoever you're prepping with a question about, what they would do and where to go from there.
Y'all, this is so much good advice. I know we have a note taker behind the scenes taking notes, but I want to be like writing all of this down right now. I loved what you said, Maggie, because data structures, algorithms, and system design, like those are starting points. You can go find free curriculum on those three things on the sites that Margaret mentioned, right? Like if you're like, I don't know what that means, system design, start Googling. Find one of your professors and start to ask them. Ask a friend who's a few years ahead of you what kinds of questions they saw in interviews. This is just such excellent advice. And Maggie, I want to reiterate one other thing you said there, which is, companies, their tech stacks, those are not secret. You can ask them what kind of technology they use. If you were at a recruiting fair and you were chatting with a recruiter about a potential role, that's a great question to ask them. You could even say, I'm considering these 3 courses next semester. What would you recommend? This stuff is not secret.
Yeah, just really quickly going off of that, the good thing about kind of how most processes work is that you do chat with a recruiter or someone more behaviorally focused at first. So you can ask them, very candidly what the team that you're going to interview for or that you're interested in uses, what language and systems they use, and then kind of have a little bit of a leg up before you get to the technical portions.
Thank you. This is so great. I want to move on to our third discussion question, which is around the sort of key information you should be highlighting. And this comes from questions we get around like, what should I be sharing in an interview? Should I only be talking about things that are on my resume? Should I be talking about projects or courses that I'm taking? We know that resumes, especially for college students, should really be one concise page. But what key information should people make sure that they get across, both in their resume and in that technical interview in particular? Maggie, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, I think all of those things you mentioned are definitely the most important. I think the way you lay it out, if you put your languages and systems that you're most strong in at the very top, that will definitely catch the recruiter, whoever's reviewing your resume's eye very quickly. And then also just don't be afraid to include projects that are completely on your own. If you weren't directed by either a class or a company, like an internship, to go all in on a specific project and it's just something you did on the side, feel free to add that. If you were a volunteer somewhere and offering your technical knowledge for free, even that would be great to add. And any other kind of extracurricular activities or volunteer things that you're passionate about, I think are important to add if you have the room, because yes, it is important to stay kind of concise and within one page if possible.
Awesome, thank you. Margaret, what do you want to add there?
One other point is highlighting your work experience. Just because you do not have an internship does not mean that it's not relevant. So one of the key aspects is when you're in school, you're very busy. But holding a job while you're in school shows that you can multitask, you can handle multiple responsibilities, and still make the grade. So that speaks volumes. To give you an example, I interviewed a young lady at one of the conferences, and she had never had a job. She was a senior, never had an internship. And she had a 4.0 GPA. Another candidate, they worked 2 jobs, they had internships, and the GPA wasn't as strong. We leaned more towards that second candidate than that first candidate. So job experience, no matter what it is relevant, because everybody doesn't necessarily have an internship or the ideal internship. But at the same time, some people, they're working their way through school, and trying to juggle is very difficult. So I know that person is going to work that much extra hard versus the individual with the 4.0 and they're cracking the books constantly.
That's such
So
good.
that's,
And it comes back to the point Maggie made up front about being authentic to yourself. If you're someone
Right.
that is pulling late nights at a second job, you don't have to hide that. That's part of your story and it's
Exactly.
part of your accomplishment.
Yeah. And then I'll just add one other aspect around community outreach that resonates significantly. And even when you're in social organizations, a lot of the social organizations, whether they're sororities or other types of organizations, they do have a community outreach arm to it, emphasize that as well. So it's looking at the individual as a whole. It's not just what type of coding you can do. And it's not only the soft skills around leadership and communication, it's looking at the overall individual as a whole.
Thanks. Yeah, such good advice. We solicited questions from all of you in the audience in your registration. So we got some questions direct from students, and we pulled out a couple that we heard over and over again. And so the first one I want to turn to here is one of our students who wrote, I've had a couple of technical interviews, and the interviewers always seem to ask the similar and same types of questions. I would love to know if there are standard questions or types of questions we can be expected to answer outside of what's on our resume. And you both mentioned things, Margaret, you mentioned case studies. We've talked a little bit about whiteboarding, algorithms. Could you talk about some of the broad categories of types of interviews and technical interviews that folks might face? Margaret, why don't you start?
Well, the types of, when you say the types of interviews, or are you more or less leaning towards the types of questions?
I guess types of questions, if you think that, yeah, let's do types of questions if you've got some ideas on that.
Well, everyone knows they're going to ask you the technical questions. Everyone knows they're going to ask you the soft skills questions. Some of the ones that we tend to throw in, and it makes people think, why should I even hire you? What are you bringing to the table that the other candidates are not bringing? That's a key one. And then we always want to present our best self while we're on the interview. So when they throw the question your way, what was a challenging situation that you failed at? And what did you learn from it? That one there, it's amazing, how many people we've interviewed, and then you get to that question, they're doing great, you get to that question, and they struggle with it because we always want to present our best self. So it's okay to take that less desirable situation, turn it into a positive, what did you learn from it, and present it in that manner. So that's one of the questions that I see people constantly, they do struggle with that. And then when they ask you the question of, what do you know about my company? It's amazing how many people cannot answer that. We're in the age of, it's the internet age. Let's go to the website, explore their website. What do they do? And understand what do they do. As you can see, I work at KPMG. You see that in my background. And the one thing that everyone always believes is the only thing we do is audit. And that is not true. So therefore, I always advise the campus recruits, just go and look at the website. We do advisory. We do a lot of technology work. And we do tax. And we do audit. but we do not just do one thing. So no matter where you go, if you go to a Google, if it understand what Google does more than the search engine that we see here. Google has a lot and number two, Google's know the umbrella that Google falls under, understand what the company does. So that's one of the key things. Just make sure you do your research so you can answer that question.
This seems to be a theme. Do your research about the tech stack, do your research about what the company does. These are, think about questions in advance that how you might describe your own work experience. Maggie, can you add anything around types of questions and types of interviews folks might face?
Yeah, as I had mentioned before, data structures, algorithms, and system design, those are definitely the types of questions for technical interviews. But behaviorally, I would say questions that focus on cross-functional collaboration, which is just a fancy word of really how do you work with others? What is your style of communication? When things go wrong, how do you handle those when working with peers and even managers or clients? Going more towards the client end as well. If you have customers or clients that you need to adhere to, customer service is definitely a big portion as well. Kind of again, how you communicate. If you communicate clearly, concisely, effectively. And then, in those technical interviews as well, just kind of if there is a roadblock or they notice a bug or something like that, and they ask you about it, kind of be prepared to answer something that you may not know the answer to right away. That those are the main subject areas because all teams really do work within other teams. Meaning if you're an engineer, you're still going to need to meet with the product teams and the marketing team potentially and other teams like that. So it's like, how do you collaborate cross-functionally with them as well? I think those are some of the main kind of focus areas that we have questions about. And I can't give away like specific questions, but definitely depending on the team, the very specific team, they'll come up with kind of their own questions. Like case studies. And with that, you can only really prepare for that by going very into the job description and analyzing kind of every single bit of what that team does and getting a really clear picture of that before you kind of go into those technical interviews.
I'm going to go off script for a second and just ask a follow-up. Let's say you're in a technical interview, maybe it's a whiteboarding interview or an algorithm challenge, and you totally draw a blank, like you don't know what to do next. What would you recommend saying or doing in that moment? Is sitting in silence and trying to figure it out the right thing? Should you ask questions? How would you address, like, everyone draws a blank every now and then, even on things we know? Any ideas?
I mean, I would start by saying a little bit of both. So definitely don't be afraid of pauses. We've like prepped interviews, at least in my experience, to be comfortable with silence. And so you may feel uncomfortable, sitting there like, oh my gosh, they need an answer right now. But sit with it a minute, rack your brain, think about the different courses or experiences you've had. And then if you do need, some help, definitely ask them. You can be candid and say, I thought about this approach at first, but it just doesn't seem like it would work. So what are your thoughts on that? And maybe do you mind giving me a nudge in the right direction? And then maybe they'll just say one word and that word will trigger you right back to a class or a practice problem you had. And then you'll feel confident going down the right path. And again, most of the time there's not necessarily one specific right path, and they really are just trying to see how you go about, discussing and really digging into the question.
I love that, because if you say, here are 3 paths I was considering, that tells them so much about you already. That tells them what's happening in your brain, even if it's not exactly what they were looking for. Margaret, do you want to add anything to that? Yeah.
I agree with Maggie. flipping it back and asking the questions and making it more of an exchange dialogue. And that way, like you mentioned, you may have three approaches. All three may be appropriate, all three may not be appropriate. But the whole aspect is it's the fact finding that you're going through and the critical thinking. That's what they're really looking at. It's not necessarily, do I have the right answer? And then if you have a story to tell along with it when you get to the end and say, this situation happened to me once before, whereas I didn't understand the particular topic. So what I did, I went and I did the research in order to find the answer. And then this is the outcome and the result. So you can turn it into a story in the end. And that's what they're more or less looking for.
This is really great, very reassuring. Let's move on to another one of the submitted questions from our students. We've talked a little bit about this, so maybe we can move through this one a little bit quickly, but I read that to stand out in an interview, you should mention the company's mission statement in your answer to show that you support the bigger picture. Are there any other tips that you suggest? We talked about a bunch of tips, but anything you want to add that we haven't covered?
Well, if you don't mind, I can start on that.
Oh, please take it away.
Yeah. Well, one of the aspects that's an easy find, over and beyond the mission statement, go to their website, pull down the earnings report.
Tell us what an earnings report is, Margaret. We may not all know what an earnings report is.
Okay. Every company, when they report their quarterly earnings, they have a conference call with their stockholders and they have a presentation. And they post that presentation to their website. So how do you find it? Always go to the very bottom of the website. And it's at the bottom, it will actually have, let me see if I recall the words correctly. Stockholder relations, something like that. It's on that effect. So you go out there, you pull down the earnings report, there's a presentation, and it will tell you the direction of the company. It will tell you about the recent acquisitions, and it will tell you what their strategy is. Pick up, you don't have to memorize it, but pick up a couple of key points. And you can use that within that interview to actually show that you know over and beyond, that you did your homework, that you know over and beyond what's in that mission statement. So that's one aspect. Another aspect, if you go to the company website, they always post their articles and their announcements. So if it's a tech company, you're also going to find a suite of case studies around their customers. Like, okay, this is the software I sell, and this is how it helped. Whether it's, let's say United Airlines, we provided XYZ to do their air traffic control systems and so on. So they will have these stories, case studies of how they have served their clients and how their products have served their clients. Go and read them. So just pick up a couple of items that you can actually use to have an exchanging dialogue during your interview. So articles, announcements, earnings report.
This is gold. I saw someone in the chat asked about private companies. Looking at their blogs or their press pages is a great idea. Nonprofits like us, Girls Who Code, we have an annual report at the bottom of our website. Right. If I were interviewing someone and they had read our annual report and asked me a question about it, I would be extremely impressed. Let's just put it like that. Maggie, do you want to throw another tip? This stuff is gold, y'all, so bring it.
I was just going to say, definitely do your research on the mission statement and kind of company values and culture, but especially with, remote interviews where you kind of can read from, your resume or online materials. Don't read word for word, like your favorite line. personally, I think that it goes a lot longer of a way if you pull just a couple keywords and explain why that resonates with you. And then maybe dig in more to the culture of not just their mission statement, but are they living out their mission statement? Look at their ERGs, which are employee resource groups, look at how they're representing and serving, underrepresented groups. And if you identify in a specific group that interests you, see if they have that resource or any type of engagement externally or internally, and then maybe speak to that. Definitely just, of course, as always, be authentic to your own personal identities, passions, and values that you may see in that company. That definitely is than just kind of reading, oh, their mission statement says this, and that sounds nice. Most mission statements will sound pretty nice.
This is such good advice. I want to do a quick lightning round. We got two questions submitted. One is a scenario, and I think it'd be really valuable for everyone to sort of hear the scenario and hear your advice from both of you. The scenario is I have an interview scheduled on Monday the 30th. That's around the corner. I've been studying for a month and I understand the material, but I can't solve the questions in 45 minutes. So this person has been practicing, they've been timing themselves. It takes me hours. I want to ask my recruiter to postpone it for another month. Is that unprofessional or disrespectful, or is there something else that I can do? This is a really great, tough question. What do you do if you've got this interview coming up? You've been working really hard. You don't feel quite ready. What do you think? Anyone can go.
I just would go and say, not to, jump to conclusions, but what would one more month do for you? Would you really be able to get it down from maybe, 2 hours to 45 minutes? If you do think that you could get it closer and closer, maybe ask for another week or two. But I will say, hiring is kind of a race in terms of there's a lot of applicants, and the hiring manager usually wants to find someone quite quickly. And so I would go with just leaning into it and maybe ask for a couple more days, but just go with your gut and be confident. And at the end of the day, I've seen many interviews occur, especially entry level, where the candidate can only get really halfway through the problem. They don't find a solution all the way, but it was still enough to show their thought process and their tech skills to push them around to the next round. So I would just be confident and know that you've done your best, and that I don't know a whole month could really help.
Margaret?
Yeah, if you're at a couple of hours and you're trying to get down to 45 minutes, I'm with Maggie. I don't think a month would help. And more than likely, the problem that they've given you, it probably is not solvable in 45 minutes.
That's very,
very
tricky.
So what they're more than likely, we're really thinking through this now. So we're thinking through it on the fly here. So more than likely, they're trying to see how you will deal with the stress and the pressure.
Yeah, that is such a good point. It might be intentionally harder than you can solve.
Right, exactly. So go and be confident and do your best. If you feel as though you have done everything you can to do your best, you will walk in there and you will do well, even if you don't get it done in 45 minutes.
Thank you.
I did just want to add one more thing. If you do have a learning disability though, or, just know that you actually do need more time than potentially, the other person, I would just share that information with your recruiter and see what they can do. Because oftentimes, all times there should be accommodations made for that.
That is such an important point. Just to reiterate that, if you require accommodations for a learning disability, you can ask for that of the interviewer in a timed interview or something like that. That's really what a tip. We have one more little.
If all else fails, say you got the flu and you need 2 weeks.
Margaret. All right, last lightning little question we got here in the chat is, someone says, I'm a freshman here, by the way. Do you still have a chance if you find yourself that you don't know the answer to a problem that they ask you? If you just flat out don't know it, do you still have a chance?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, you do.
Sure.
And it's back to the last question that we were just talking
I know.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And you do have a chance. And it's back to the point I made. It's not about having the best technical solution. It's all about the approach.
You could even say, I'm a freshman. I haven't learned data structures yet. Unfortunately, I don't know how to answer that.
All right, we are going to start to wind down here. I want to add my last piece of advice, and then I'm going to give it over to Maggie and Margaret for one last pro tip, just a quick one if they've got one. Mine is you got to send a thank you note. I've interviewed a million people. When I get a quick note, it doesn't have to be 3 paragraphs. It can be 5 sentences that say, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed learning about your organization. You know, I would value the opportunity to continue this conversation. Thank you so much. Like, it shows me that you want this role. It's thoughtful. And it shows that you kind of cross the T's and dot the I's. So a thank you note is my final tip for the evening. Margaret, do you have a final tip you'd like to offer?
It's funny you said thank you note. I remember one job I went for, and instead of doing the email, I'm not saying that you have to do this, but it's just a story. I actually typed the letter, printed it out, and I mailed it.
Wow.
And when I went for my final interview, whereas I walked in and she said, oh no, this isn't an interview. I just wanted to see the person that actually mailed me a letter, and she had it right up on her. It was taped up to the wall. She said, no one sends me this. They just keep giving me all these emails.
Did you get the job, Margaret?
I got the job.
All right. She got the job. Maggie, sorry, Margaret, last tip before we close out for the night. Any final tip from you, Margaret?
Yes. And I just continue to stress, be confident in all that you do.
Yes.
There is no job that you cannot get. If you're prepared, prepare. That's key. You will do well on that interview.
Thank you. Those are really good words. Maggie, last tip of the evening.
You should be a team ad, not a team fit. So do not try to mold yourself to fit in what you think that they are looking for. They are looking for someone who will add value to their team. And on the flip side, make sure that the team you're interviewing with will add value in your life as well.
I will love it. It's wonderful advice. So we are going to close out for the night, but before you run off, am I correct, both of you, Margaret and Maggie, that there are internship programs at your respective companies? I'm guessing that there are internships at your companies?
Yes.
Yes, there are. KPMG, if you go to our website, we constantly post all of our internships, and it actually tells you about the various levels of our programs. There's a wealth of information out there for you.
The reason I ask is because some folks in the chat said, where can I find information about internships? And there's lots of sources. We'll put some in our follow-up email and in our recap. But these two amazing companies, KPMG and Warner, have those. And if I were you, if I were a college student on this call tonight, I would go find Maggie and Margaret on LinkedIn tomorrow, and I would send them a thank you note for their advice tonight. And I would remember them when I go looking for internships for my next summer gig. So we put up a survey. Please pull up your phones. This is for our student friends, and just hold up your camera to your screen. This takes 1 minute and it really helps us. Thank you, Margaret. She posted it in the chat for all of you. We have one more Girls Who Code talk in December. Thank you, everybody who came. The chat, the questions, amazing. Margaret, Maggie, like, I am 32 and I wrote down all your advice. I'm going to use it in my next interview. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. Everyone have a great night and a safe holiday.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.